Tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. There we go. Okay, so let's take a little look at the theory about web servers and understand why they are so essentially so simple. All right, and then we'll turn to the practicalities of getting our TinyNet web server set up so that it will give us the nice, proper user interface for our webmail. Right back at the same PowerPoint as this morning, these two are put together because they're so closely related. Skip down a little bit to, this is where we left off this morning, 800 decisions. Web-based mail, though, is a nice French word, a suite of CGI programs, whatever that means, that act as a mail client, our mail user agent, using a web browser to put up the graphical user interface. All right? And that means we need to get some code that we can execute. All right? And the code that we have is called Squirrel Mail. We use it because it's stable. Right? It's been around for a while. It acts predictably, right? Usually pretty reliable. Right? It's written in a programming language called PHP. All right, now I'm just going to do a little editorial here and shift over and put this in the chat. All right. PHP is the COBOL of the 21st century. There are a lot of good applications found. So there is plenty of maintenance programming, but nobody should be using it for new development. Now, that's purely a pure editorial. My opinions come at no extra charge. But COBOL is the old mainframe language. And back at year 2000, back in 1997, people started getting really worried because they had these applications written in COBOL from the 60s and the 70s, when it was one of the great programming languages for databases and inventory and billing, like electrical companies or insurance companies, airline reservation systems. All of that was written in this language called COBOL. And none of it, everybody was afraid that none of it was ready for prime time when we went to years that started with 19 to years that started with 20. Everybody was just using the last two digits, but when it came to 2000, 2001, a lot of it was going to break. And there were a lot of people in places like Delaware and Houston with the oil refineries and chemical factories and a lot of really complex production control software that, there were a lot of people making real money from 1996 to 1999, converting these process control applications from COBOL and Fortran, which was the other big language at the time for mainframes, converting that to C++, all right? PHP is kind of the same way now. Back in the 90s, especially, or right up to around 2005, PHP was the web programming language. But last 10 years, it's been pushed out, especially by server-side JavaScript and by Python and by the Microsoft .NET libraries and Java, all right? So Squirrel Mail is written in PHP, it works fine. Moodle is written in PHP. Lots of people very popular with complicated websites use what they call the content management system called WordPress, all right? Also PHP. But PHP has a lot of known weaknesses. It has a lot of limitations. So everybody has moved like mean stack, Mongo, Angular, Node.js. I forget what E means. And Python. Or .NET. Now, you know what? These are the ones that replace PHP. You know what? And so, you know, PHP is there, but you got to recognize it as a bit of a legacy language when it comes to web development. Okay, so editorial finished. Let's get back to business here. All right. So we use it because it's simple, it's easy, and yeah, it works, just like Moodle. All right. So what we've got to do is we've got to configure our Monkey web server here, all right, to use PHP, the PHP interpreter, right? Because our app is written in that programming language, right? We actually have two apps. One is PHP LDAP admin, right? So that we can connect to our LDAP server that we'll deal with next week, okay? And Squirrel Mail that we can try out as soon as we get those little changes made to the mail host configuration that we talked about this morning. So let's talk a little bit about web servers, all right? HTML, hypertext markup language. Oops, I'm sorry, I keep doing that and I've got to stop, all right? HTML is hypertext markup language, all right? That is the format for a web page document. HTTP, P for protocol, HT is hypertext, and ML is markup language, TP is transport protocol, all right? The well-known ports are port 80 for plain text and HTTPS secure. HTTP uses port 443. But here's the real important point. Each component of the page is retrieved separately and combined in the browser for the display. All right? So when I come down here and put in, let's get rid of the email here. All right? I've got, let's do this one. My All right. Now, sometimes with a slow page, we can see a little box pop up down here, right, that says waiting for. But all of this text part is in one file, right? This image is a separate request that needs to be retrieved. All of the JavaScript for the menu system is in yet another file that needs to be retrieved. And so the browser has to collect all of these files together, this one and this one and this one, and maybe another one or two, right? All of these images all come separately. The browser has to collect all of these up and put them together, following the instructions in the main page here with all of the text. Right? All of this text, it also has instructions for retrieving these images and retrieving the JavaScript, okay, the code. The browser has a JavaScript interpreter that interprets the code to put up this menu, make it do what these fun things that it does here, okay? And a whole bunch of things about colors and fonts. That's actually in a separate file called a CSS, cascading style sheet. All right. So the browser needs to collect all of this stuff together so it can display this page. And the fun thing is, it can come from many different servers. All right. The TinyNet site is all on one server, but there's multiple requests and responses. But other places, when we see adverts, for example, on web pages, they can come from completely different server, all right? And again, the browser collects them all up to display. So browsers are hugely, horribly complicated beasties, all right? Because they need to be able to have codecs to process all kinds of images and WebMs and MP4s and deal with all kinds of colors and fonts and whatever we can do with JavaScript, all right, that has to be incorporated into the browsers as well, all right? So browsers, hugely complicated. But the web server itself is very, very simple, okay? The web server itself is actually even kind of dumb, all right? What the web server does is it looks at the URL, all right? When I click mytiny.net here, or a link on a page, all right, this gets sent to the web server, right? The web server looks at this and says, okay, is this a complicated request or a simple request? If it's a simple request, I can just look into my directory of local pages. Formal term for that is the document root. And grab one out of there, send it back to the browser, and I'm finished with that. All right. If it's a complex request, the browser, the web server says, ooh, if I can't get it out of here, then never mind, I'm just going to hand it off to somebody else. And that's what we call a CGI app, right? CGI stands for Common Gateway Interface, which maybe made sense back in 1992 when the web was invented, but never mind. Another part of our proud cultural heritage that we see, right? It's still called CGI, and the apps can be written in any language, right? PHP just being one of those, right? There's lots of other popular ones. Again, there are lots of different web servers as well, All right. Apache is probably the most popular still. It has been for a long, long time. But Microsoft's IIS is catching up. Light TPD or Lighty, they people call it. Right? That one, I remember that was the one that was used by YouTube for a long time. I don't know if it still is or not. Right? There's another one called Nginx that is gaining a lot of popularity, but ours is the dead simple one that we call Monkey, right? So that's our web server program. Virtual hosts, we're going to get to that a little bit later. Ooh, this was the diagram that we saw earlier, all right? And Squirrel Mail right here is our mail user agent, and it's going to provide the PHP code here, all right? Provides the interface. It contacts Dovecot to retrieve the items in the mailbox, like we saw this morning, right? Bring them back, reformat them, and put them up on the screen for us. It puts up the form, right, so that we can write a new email, and then it will take that and process it off to the gateway, just like we did this morning, just like with Telnet. Squirrel Mail does that dialogue too. Get the email into the system and then let it get through the system to get dropped into the mailbox where we can retrieve it and look at it in Squirrel Mail. So this is going to be the fundamental part of our whole system. And that is what we need to focus on now. What we need to focus on now is the Squirrel Mail configuration to get it to run PHP, to take in these complicated URLs and pass them off to the PHP interpreter so that we can see the webmail interface in the browser. This is all to say, this is the same way Gmail works, the same way Outlook in the browser works, all right? Everybody's doing the same thing. It's just that sometimes we do it in slightly different ways. Okay, that's still my message, so never mind. Harness this back a little bit here. All right. So let's come back here to the browser for a minute. Ooh, I got to get it up. Here in AP space. That's Moodle. There we go. I'll put this one back on the COM table. There we go. All right, and here's our space. Okay. Let's roll it. All right. So here in the TinyNet base system videos, we'll get to this next week. This is our big project for next week, is checking things out, making sure everything's ready. All right. First steps, we need to do all of these steps and all in order to get things to work out. All right. This is where we were this morning. Mail. First experiment was an epic fail. All right. But once we fixed it, we saw it get delivered. Talked about adding a CNAME. All right. And this is the one here. Web server configure for PHP. This is what we've got to get done this afternoon. Let's open this one up in a new tab here. All right, so web server is essentially simple, right? And Monkey is got a very simple configuration file. It doesn't have the hundreds of plugins that the other ones do. IIS doesn't call them plugins, but there's a whole bunch of individual settings that need to be enabled for the registry for DLLs. So essentially they're the same as plugins in Apache and in Nginx, the other ones. But what we're doing here is we're just positioning this. It's testing the email service with webmail, all right? That one, oops, sorry. That's this one, it's called Configure Mail and Squirrel Mail on the menu itself. And how that didn't get in the video, but never mind. All right. So we assume that we've tested this with Telnet here. Just a little bit. All right. We tested this one with Telnet, and this part is working. So all we need to do is get PHP working with Monkey, all right? And from there, we're rolling forward. Okay, so this is basically what we've been saying. Web servers are essentially very similar. I'm sorry, very simple. Little bit about PHP, all right? Just so you know what it really kind of is, all right? But basically, there's not too much that we need to do with a PHP configuration if we're satisfied with most of the defaults. Squirrel Mail has lots of options that can and should be left as defaults, all right? We're going to dive in and make some little changes. Maybe, right? There's not much that we have to do because both Squirrel Mail and the other PHP app here, LDAP admin, they're pretty much plug and play once you get your PHP going. And PHP itself is pretty much plug and play. Again, there are zillions of options for fine-tuning it. But the actual fact was, we don't have to do anything with them because they pretty much worked just when we got them off the distro. But the thing that we do need to do is configure the web server. But that is all done in one single file, all right? And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 things to do, and 2 of them are really kind of trivial, all right? But that's because we're using a simple web server and it has a simple configuration file. All right, so these are the 4 steps that are covered in the video. It's just 4 small edits to one file, and that's job done. Let's check it out. All right, let's let this roll a little bit forward here. There we go. Getting placed in the website. Scrolling down a little bit. There we go. There's the 4 steps that we need to take care of. All right, so what have I got here? All right, I got here. This is my mail server. Actually, this is just where we left off this morning. All right. You can see our queued at A4096. All right. So we're sending the Telnet mail. As soon as we get that one tested out with Telnet, all right, and get it delivered to our mailbox, that's the kind of suggested workflow, all right, for the project here. I've got my web server here. I did the setrole.sh, right, from the config ISO. If it says MyTyVM here, all right, that is not ready, it's not configured, all right? When it comes up with the web prompt, I've customized my prompt a little bit. We'll talk about that next week, customize my host name here, all right? But it needs to say web, it needs to have 56 address, 2 of them, and one of them is always going to be this 252 address. And we'll talk about why that is when we talk about secure communications, because this address is embedded in our web server certificate, right? Because we need to have it that way to work with our browsers. Back here in the background is my gateway, right? My ISP happened to assign an IP address just because it did, all right? This one is no address set, doesn't really matter. These 3 matter, 1, 2, and 3, 56, 66, 76. That's the important part for managing our subnets. Right? I don't need to log in here. Right? Once I'm at the login screen, then I can start my other ones, and DHCP is ready to hand out IP addresses when these guys make the request. That's where this 137 came from DHCP here. All right, so I'm going to log in here, and I'm going to start MC and find this file that I need to edit. Put those aside. Get rid of the clutter. There we go. All right. Now, again, I'm going to stress, memorize this command, netstat minus TULP, like the most famous flower from Holland, the tulip. All right. This tells us what are our TCP and UDP listening ports. You need to check every time to make sure that we have what we need in terms of services up and listening. For the web server, dead simple, very short list. SSH, D on the SSH port, Excinet D on the Telnet port, DHCPC-D on the BootP client port, and our famous friend Monkey on the HTTP port. So, all good, we're ready to move on here. There we go. Now we can start MC, and again, let's enter on the 2 dots to move up one in the hierarchy, get into ETC, and find that file that we need. ETC, monkey, and monkey.conf, all right? Monkey.deny is, I don't know, kind of a stub, but you can do access control with monkey.deny. Monkey.mime is for its internal functioning, right? Monkey.conf.dist is the one that came with the source code. And monkey.conf is the one that we need to do a little bit of editing on. Other ones, you're going to find this whole directory all full of plugins and configuration files and all sorts of things. Monkey, we're keeping it simple here. Okay, so all these ones that start with a hashtag, again, these are comments, right? So when it says comment out, it means to add a hashtag in the front, uncomment, take the hashtag away. We'll be doing that in just a few minutes. So 4 things we need to pay attention to here. Oops, keep doing that. Change the default location for serving web pages server root from var monkey httalks to var www. Find the 2 index file directives. Comment out the first one, uncomment the second one. Ooh, that's going to be tough because that just means put a hashtag in front of the first one, take it away from the second one. Move down to the CGI section and change the server script alias. And finally, remove a hashtag from one other line. Oof. Wow, good thing there's nothing tough here. It's been a tough day already, but there's nothing tough here. Okay, so the one thing that we just want to keep in mind here, all right, that first one says change the server root from this one to a different one. And whenever you see that, start thinking, how am I going to go back to a working configuration if I make a mistake? Because people do, and trust me, I've done enough of my own so that I'm very cautious about this. And so when I need to change something like this, what I'm going to do and what I recommend you get in the habit of is F3 to mark, F5 to copy this line, put a hashtag on the original one, and then make modifications to the one that's right below it. So you can see the old one, you can see the new one, and if something goes wrong, you can easily change it back or figure out why it's wrong. So that's all we're going to do here, right? The F3, move across, watch for the big B up here, all right? F5 to paste it back in and just move across and edit it. This routine should be getting familiar now, all right? The more you practice, the easier it gets. F5 there, F3 a couple of times, big B is gone up there at the top. Hashtag, and just change that to var www. And step 1 is done. Move down. Ooh, index file, there it is. Hashtag in front of the first one. To uncomment the second one. That swaps it around, right? This one becomes just a comment inactive, all right? This one, these are explained in there, but basically, you know, when I put in just, ouch, keep doing that. Why do I keep doing that? When I just put in my-tiny.net, all right? Nothing on the end of it, okay? The web server says, oh, I don't have an exact file that I should be getting, like this one. I don't have this part. What am I going to do? I'm going to look for my index file directive. And if there's nothing there, no file specified, I'm going to serve back index.html. If I can't find that in my document root, I'm going to serve back index.htm. If I can't find that in my document root, I'm going to serve back index.php. If I can't find that in my document root, I'm going to kick up a 404 file not found and let somebody else sort it out, because I'm a web server. I'm very simple-minded. You know, if you're going to play with me like that, then you figure it out. Tell me how to do things. Tell me exactly what you want. All right? Tell me exactly what you want. Okay, shift down a little bit more to the CGI section. There we are. All right. Now, server script alias, we need to do the same thing. Copy this one, paste it in down below. All right. And if you look carefully, you'll see that this one ends in a slash. But if you look back at the document root, it doesn't. I take that very personally because it's inconsistent syntax and it's so easy to make a mistake on that one. All right. Which again is why, not F2. Oh, I lost my big B up here at the top. Fat fingers, clumsy typing. There we go. F3 with the big B. Now I got the highlight. Open a blank line. F5, paste it in. Get rid of that big B at the top. Now I can comment out the first one and make sure that I do this one right so that it comes out var www. Yay. Last one, uncomment this. Now, this is the important one because this one says when we get a file in that ends in .sh, all right, pass that along to the bash interpreter. When we get one that says .php, pass that one along to the PHP interpreter. All right, this one is Moodle. So this request here, when it came in to the web server from my browser, when I clicked through on this link, all right, it went to be processed by the PHP interpreter on that server. And this is what came back. All right. Same thing here. PHP. All right. The file ends in .php. The rest of this is the rest of the path. All right. So this is the WebM, and the PHP is processing all of this part. Okay, so we need to uncomment this to add PHP to the CGI interpreters that the web server knows about. And virtual hosts, we'll talk about that a little bit later, just showing you that section. F2 to save, F10 to exit, F10 to exit MC. Now, the standard rule is when we make changes to a configuration file, we need to restart the server. All right. Now, hang on just 1 minute. Let me get back here to where we were. Just point this out here. Okay. Restart monkey. Now, if we did first things first, right? All right. All we need to do down here is treat it like all the rest of our servers, DNSMask and Postfix and Dovecot. Just call etc rc.d, rc.monkey, stop, and then up arrow and change it to start, all right? Or we can do it the hard way and kill it off in the process list, right? And restart it with its full file name, all right? So you can do it the easy way, but in the video here, we're going to do it the hard way. And start up HTOP. Right? It's like Control-Alt-Delete. It's a process manager in Windows, right? Task manager in Windows. Look down the list, find the monkey process, USR SBIN monkey minus big D, all right? And we just scroll down here a little bit and highlight that one. And then F9, kill the monkey, kill the monkey. Kill the monkey. F9. And it pops up this big list because there's a lot of ways to kill processes in Linux, Unix, all right? But the default one, SIGTERM here, is the standard one. And it's pretty much all the time the one we want to use just to kill off a process. So that one's selected by default. So all we have to do is hit enter. And our monkey process disappears. F10 to quit. And the same one we saw before. All right, and it's also, let's do netstat minus TULP first, just to be sure. No monkey process running there. User SBIN monkey minus big D. There we go. And netstat has it back. And now we can get back and look at our IP address here for a minute. Come back to Chrome, all right? Open a new tab, put in 192.168.56.252, all right? Either one will work, but since this one is always the same, the other one, DHCP one, can change, right? This 2521 is always the same. Makes it quite convenient for using from our Windows web browser. Also, remember, the Windows host-only network configuration needs to be on the same subnet. All right, that's why it's important to get that right as 192.168.56, and usually we just use 56.1. Right? Because that puts it on the same subnet. And that means when I hit enter, this empty one is going to go to my monkey web server on the virtual machine. And it's going to serve me back the index.html. Hey, look at that. All right. Monkey is running on your system. Smile and be happy. Right? There's another video, and this is what we'll be working on our own videos with, to when we click through here on Squirrel Mail and LDAP admin. These are our two PHP apps. PHP info one will work. We can check that one out and see. All right? And there's just a couple of other demo links here. The TinyNet root CA certificate, we'll get to that one, right, when we start talking about SSL and TLS. So, Bazinga. That's all there is to do for that step. And that only leaves one tiny step beyond, which is the basic configuration of the LDAP server, all right, which we will take care of next week, because those changes are very simple, as well as setting permissions, checking the log files,